In an attempt to tame the wild west of multifocal and premium IOLs, I'm going to give you a talk about a large study that's being conducted with the American Academy and the Food and Drug Administration, as well as a number of the major intraocular lens manufacturers who've been helping to participate in defining some of the subjective responses that patients have. And this is a preliminary report in terms of this. This is the preoperative data on over 700 patients in a large study that I'll describe over the next few minutes. We're still collecting the postoperative data and analyzing it. So unfortunately, I can't give you that information. This is as you'll see, it's a rather massive study, not only in terms of the number of patients, but also in the width of the information that we're collecting. This study was generated because we really don't have a validated questionnaire for all these different studies that are being done. Each individual company is actually providing a questionnaire to patients. We're getting lots of information about visual performance with objective measures in terms of our classic measurements of contrast sensitivity and visual acuity, but we don't have validated information in terms of how our patients are responding to these various intraocular lenses, whether they're monofocals or premium lenses. So in an attempt to do this, the FDA worked in conjunction with the American Academy of Ophthalmology and reached out to the industry. And we've been developing a patient-reported outcome measure for premium IOLs. And this helps us support device applications in terms of the regulatory application and standardizes it, and also other regulatory related activities, as well as, I think for us as clinicians, it aids us in doing research where we're comparing apples to apples and oranges to oranges, and helps us with quality improvement activities. So this study was done in conjunction with the FDA and the Academy. The Academy served as an intermediary. The RAND Corporation did the actual data collection. And the University of California Biostatistics Group is analyzing the data and providing that in conjunction with the advisory group. We all are familiar with the many different lenses that have come on the market in the United States. There are even more internationally. It's a little bit overwhelming, as Damien pointed out to you in the last presentation. And this study in particular focused on the premium IOLs that have been approved in the United States for this study. This is the advisory committee, which consisted of both industry, particularly regulatory members, as well as the FDA, as well as some members of the Academy. The Academy task force members are shown on the left. We want to thank especially Gunyang Yun and his team here at the University of Rochester for helping us with the illustrations that you'll see, the pictures that you'll see in just a moment, as well as acknowledging the FDA members and the terrific help that we got from the industry advisory group as well. So there were developmental steps to this very large study. First, a literature review, then 13 focus groups were conducted on 93 patients. 87 patients spoke English, 6 were Spanish speaking. There were 19 cognitive interviews with 14 English interviews and 5 Spanish interviews. This served as the basis for how we actually labeled the pictures that we'll show you in just a few minutes. So we developed the language to describe what the patients were experiencing from these focus groups. So it was in the patient's own language, basically, that was guiding us. Then we went out and did the field test, and then it did a preoperative and a 6-month postoperative study. In the 6-month post-op study, data is pending. The advisory group served in terms of giving feedback throughout the entire study, and we're still very actively involved in that. So in terms of the actual study, the patients were 45 and older. They would complete either an English or a Spanish survey, and then they were scheduled for binocular implantation. We always used the same intraocular lens in the second eye. So there was no mix and matching. We also included a monofocal group to give us some control information. There were accommodative lenses, spherical EDOFs, spherical multifocals, bifocals, and trifocals, as well as toric lenses, monofocal, accommodative, and EDOF, as well as multifocal lenses that were included. These were only lenses that were approved by FDA in the United States for this particular study. The dominant eye was targeted for emmetropia. The other eye may be targeted for emmetropia, but one could create up to 3/4 of a diopter of myopia as a target. The potential visual acuity of 20/30 or better was required after cataract surgery for qualification for doing the questionnaire at that 6-month gate. So the field test collected the first and second eye intraocular lens implant date, as well as the type of lens implanted in the right and left eye, binocular, corrected and uncorrected visual acuity is also recorded. The refractive error was recorded both preoperatively and postoperatively at that 6-month gate, and the surgical complications as well as postoperative complications were recorded. So the dysphotopsia, one of the problems that we have, and we don't have a lot of information on this because we don't have the post-op data at this point, but the dysphotopsias really aren't adequately assessed with the current patient-reported outcome measures that we're dealing with. And one of the objectives of this study was to get a handle on that, to improve that. And so we wanted to develop a questionnaire to better measure dysphotopsias and objectively measure that in terms of their subjective response. This is the flow chart of the visual disturbance and symptoms following cataract surgery. You'll notice on the right are the entopic phenomena, which also included floaters. These are really confounding variables. So we included them in the study because they're so dominant in the population, and we wanted to sort that out when we actually did the study. And then we looked at the dysphotopsias, the positive and the negative dysphotopsias. And Jack Holliday, as you well know, is very passionate. So is Sam Mascott, who was involved in the task force in sorting out these various forms of dysphotopsias. So in the field test survey, there were 86 questions. Eventually, we'll hone this down so it's more manageable. But there were over 700 patients that filled out the questionnaire preoperatively. We noted the frequency, severity, and bother at the last 7 days for 14 different symptoms. This included glare, hazy vision, blurry vision, starburst, halos, snowballs, floaters, double images, rings, distortion, light flashes with eyes closed or open, shimmering images, and dark shadows. And I have to again thank Gun-Young and his team for being able to simulate this with images as well. And we also asked when the symptoms occurred, whether it was with wearing your glasses or contact lenses or not wearing them, or with and without them, as well as the time of day. So this is our reference image. It was developed by Gun-Young's lab. And you'll notice this is actually the University of Rochester campus, if you've ever been on our campus. And this particular image is simulating dusk conditions. You can notice that you can almost see the license plate in the designation on the back of the bus, as well as the license plate here. That becomes important. So this is just a sample of one of the pages of the questionnaire, which deals with halos. This is the image that the patient would see on the questionnaire, and then it asks defined halos are bright circles or ridges that appear around sources of light, such as oncoming car headlights. Then asks, in the last 7 days, how often did you see the halos? Never, sometimes, usually, or always. in question 14, question 15. When did you see the halos in the last 7 days, with or without your glasses or contact lenses? We also asked what time of day, during the dawn or dusk, or at night, and then how severe were they in question 17, and how bothered were you by the halos over the last 7 days, and not at all too extremely. So this is our baseline preoperative data that I'm going to present to you now on the 717 patients that did their preoperative survey. We asked about vision, and most patients reported either poor or only fair vision. 84% were in that category. 36% reported poor, 48% reported fair. In terms of satisfaction, it almost directly paralleled that. 83% were either very dissatisfied or somewhat dissatisfied. 48% were completely dissatisfied with their vision from their cataracts, and 35% were somewhat dissatisfied. Now, there were two prominent preoperative symptomatic groups, and I call these the blurry vision group, which included blurred vision or hazy vision, and the glare group, which included starburst, streaking, and halos. Blurry vision group usually occurred in about 67% of the patients surveyed. The glare group, however, was even more common. It occurred in about 83%, and it's interesting how this actually, it's kind of fascinating how they interpreted this subjectively. This is the blurred vision group, and I want to go back and mention that based on our surveys initially with the patients, they actually articulated the wording for this. So the blurred vision group described this image as blurred vision, but you'll also note that the high spatial frequency contrasts with lost. If you look for that license plate again, or the details on the back of the bus, it's pretty much gone. That's in contrast, actually, to what the patients described as the hazy vision or foggy vision. Here, the high spatial frequency was actually maintained. You can almost see the license plate. You can almost see the detail on the back of the bus. If we go back to the blurred vision group, you can see there's not enough detail for high spatial frequency, whereas with foggy vision or hazy vision, there was some. So this blurred vision group, in this group, the symptoms were most prominently associated with dissatisfaction and worse vision. It was most noticeable with daytime conditions, and that's really important compared to nighttime, and you'll see that compared to the glare group in just a second. Pre-op, overall, 67% of patients noted blurred vision or hazy vision, and post-op, this decreased to 22% of the patients surveyed at 6 months. Now, as I mentioned, we don't have full 6-month data, but we have enough that we can tell pretty well that there was a pretty significant drop in blurred vision. There was a 45% decrease in symptoms based on our preliminary 6-month data. But it's also interesting that 22% of the patients still had some blurred vision. And you need to understand that we haven't sorted out the monofocal group versus the multifocal groups at this point, nor have we sorted out the issue of whether they had some residual refractive error. So all that needs to be sorted out, the 6-month data, and we hope to give that to you later at some point. In terms of the glare group, you'll notice that these are the images that were developed. We had a snowball image, a halo image, a starburst image on the lower left, and streaks image on the lower right. This was all developed again by Gun-Young's lab here at the University of Rochester. And the glare group was by far and away the most dominant symptom, and it included starbursts, snowballs, and halos. And again, these were in the patient's own words, and over 500 patients of the 700 plus patients studied preoperatively noted it. The interesting thing was it was really pretty low frequency of symptoms during daytime condition, less than 10%. I thought that was kind of very, very impressive. At night, though, it's like a vampire. These images dramatically increase. They go up to about 77% of the patients noting it preoperatively for starburst, snowballs, and halos. And they dominated all other symptoms by far at night. The change from pre-op to post-op, and again, this is the preliminary 6-month data, but 83% noted it pre-op, but only 36% noted it post-op. And even when they noted it, there was a fairly significant reduction in the severity of the symptoms. Overall, 47% decrease in the frequency of symptoms in our preliminary post-op data. So again, we see the glare group just to remind you of snowballs, halos, starburst, and the streaks. So a couple other things just to finish up. Pre-op floaters were very common, and we were glad that we included this because I think it's going to confound some of the information otherwise. It was noted as the next most common symptom, 49% at baseline pre-op. The symptoms were actually reduced at night. Only 23% of patients noted it was problematic at night. And the severity of floaters was far less than the glare or blurred vision group. So they were less bothersome to patients overall in that pre-op data. The other subjective complaint that patients noted was double or multiple images. As you can see in this car image, the car light is kind of smeared and doubled. Here, the bus light is actually doubled as well. And this was actually moderately frequent, 27%. But the important thing about this, that when it occurred, it was usually very, very disabling and problematic for the patients. So in summary, we're reviewing the FDA clinical trial, the Academy FDA clinical trial. Basically, we found that in the 717 patients, that there were two major groups. The blurry vision group dominated symptoms during the daytime. In the glare group, which included starbursts, snowballs, and halos, dominated at night. The postoperative follow-up data will report on, hopefully in a few months, and it will make it possible to kind of sort out this massive amount of data that we have. So stay tuned for more information as we get it. Thank you.
Great, thank you, Scott. I'm assuming that hopefully by the Academy meeting of this year that these results will be kind of tied together and we'll get the full presentation on the post-op.
Yeah, we're hoping to get that. I'm hoping that we get it sometime later in the summer. So
great,
massive amount of data. It's a lot to sort through.
Sure, absolutely. But looking forward to it because I think it's highly valuable to have this type of information because it really provides you feedback on how to improve designs and try to mitigate some of the issues that people face in the real world.
Yeah, it's really tough for clinicians to kind of sort out the subjective symptoms, and it goes right back to what Damien and Ron were kind of talking about. We've got the Wild West right now, and this kind of brings the sheriff into town and sort of gives us some continuity where we're not trying to sort out apples, oranges, and bananas.
Okay, let's see. So it looks like George Gao has left, so we'll unfortunately have to miss his question. Ron, did you have some comments that you want to?
Yeah, I think I'm going to make up to everybody. I'd like to make a quick comment, and I think Damien kind of alluded to it with all the new EDOF lenses are, and then of course Scott, you kind of drill down into how do we begin to characterize this. It's very complex for surgeons to know how to navigate the selection process of people to get the right kind of IOL because of all these different symptoms and everybody has different impressions of what that effect is, and even different thresholds for what they think is acceptable for their patients. Add to that the fact that the cost structure of this is also very fluid. We now have EDOF lenses that are priced almost at the same as a monofocal lens and give a little extra depth of focus. So how do you sell somebody a potentially cheaper modified monofocal versus a more substantial EDOF lens and the different pricings that are going on? The complexity of it is almost out of control with what a surgeon wants to navigate. And I think we almost have to drill down and have very, very kind of concrete things so that there's not a lot of false advertising going out, with what something can deliver.
Yeah, the other thing about this is that when you look at the relationship between the clinicians and those companies and the patients have almost no say in this up until now. And this actually creates a language or a communication system that allows the patients to actually articulate what they're experiencing in a more objective and validated way. So I'm optimistic that this is really going to provide a really nice tool for clinicians to make more objective and more reasonable decisions in terms of all these different pros and cons that you, Ron, and Damien have talked about.